So I've broken down fear for you a little bit. Now I want to get into perfection, because perfection is something that I have become more and more interested in. And if I were to ever write a book, I would probably write a book about perfection. And I would probably title it Mastering Imperfection, just because perfect people still want to master something. So if we master imperfection, it still feels like I want to read it as a perfectionist. So perfectionism is something that I have seen since I went into the psychology field. And before I was in the psychology field, I was a Division I athlete. And before that, I was a driven perfectionist, but I didn't want to admit I was a perfectionist because I wasn't perfect enough to admit that I was perfect, because only perfect people were perfectionists, and I'm not perfect enough, so I can't be that. So, if you say you're not a perfectionist, you are. And if you say that you are a perfectionist like me, you're recovering. So either way, let's just all accept in here that on some level you're a perfectionist. And if you say that you're not a perfectionist, at some point in your life you were, but you told yourself that you will never succeed, so you just gave up and quit, which still makes you a perfectionist. So you can have a perfectionist that looks perfect on the outside. You can have a perfectionist who's a complete mess and can't leave the house. Why? Because the person who can't leave the house has an all or nothing thinking. I can never be perfect, so I'm not even going to try. I'm not going to leave the house and go to school. I'm not going to shower. I'm not going to get out of bed, because I will never rise to the occasion and meet the standards and expectations of my parents and teachers and coaches, so therefore I'm just not going to try. And I'm kind of a piece of shit for it, right? That's what they're thinking. Then on the side over here, you have a perfectionist who's like, I have to be perfect, I have to be perfect, I have to be perfect, I have to be perfect. What if I'm not perfect? Oh my God, I'm going to fail, so I just have to keep being more perfect. And they get wound really, really, really tight. And guess what they have? An emotional leak. They feel like shit, and then they start all over again, right? So whether you're all or nothing, all perfectionist or no perfectionist, you're somewhere on the continuum. And if you're going to argue with me that you're not a perfectionist, then what I'm going to ask you to do is lean into the concept that you may be, and just start to see yourself in here. Because what we tend to deny is typically who we are, right? So a perfectionist is someone who has such high standards for themselves that they are always striving to meet that expectation. And they only identify who they are through their performance. So I am a good person if I perform good. I am a pretty person if I put on my makeup and my dress and I look pretty. I am a strong athlete if I make sure that I look like the athlete and act like the athlete. Okay? If I'm a musician, I'm going to practice, and I'm never going to feel good enough, because if I do that, then I'm going to make sure that I keep holding myself to the highest standard possible. And I only know myself through my performance. So therefore, if my performance is bad, I'm bad. And if I don't try because I'm tired, I'm lazy. If I am sick and coughing and don't feel well, I'm weak. So everything that they perform to the outside world is their identity inside. So their self-definition, their ego, their sense of self is labeled and organized by how they perform. So that's another thing I want you to remember, is that perfectionists measure themselves based on how they perform or how they don't perform. And perfectionism is very, very dangerous, because the suicidality increases the more of a perfectionist you are. Why? Climb really, really high, and guess how far, when you fall, guess how far you fall? Really far. So perfectionism, like I said, is the overvalue of performance and the undervalue of self. So I am performance, I am not myself. And there's this great quote, and I had to adjust it a little bit, but it says, young people learn only through performance that they have a self. So self is your ego. It is who you think you are. It's how you identify yourself. It's how you feel, almost a spirit about you. So egos and selves are very hard to describe. No one has done a very good job of it yet. And basically, it's this idea of, I like to think about it as like, it's like a floating, glowing ball in the center of my body, and that's myself. It just accumulates my life experiences, it accumulates my physical feelings, my emotional feelings, And that glowing ball is myself. Okay? It feels really sacred. I think it's a very special, sacred relationship that you have with yourself. And that glowing ball in perfectionism is only as good or as important as the way you've performed that day. So you start to get kind of an icky feeling with that, because that aura that's supposed to feel really good to you and feel really safe and connected is starting to feel like you're a friend or your enemy based on how you did that day. And that's where perfectionism is so dangerous, is because when you disconnect from yourself, from that glowing ball, when you disconnect from that, you become suicidal. Because if that ball, if that aura is not glowing, it's dead, it's dying, and you feel no sense of purpose. And so that's why I'm very passionate about perfectionism leading to suicidal thoughts, is because if you don't feel good about yourself, that is really what keeps you alive. And it is something that we need to be talking more and more of. And unfortunately, I think the way that we pressure our children to perform and cope with failure is pretty dangerous right now.